something shifts. The moment you stop chasing an avoidant, not dramatically, not loudly, but structurally, because avoidant relationships often run on a hidden imbalance. One person moves forward, the other moves back. One reaches, the other regulates distance. It's not random. It's a pursuer-distancer system. And systems only work when both roles stay active. When you chase, the avoidant doesn't have to question anything. Your pursuit provides clarity. They know you're there. They know you care. They know the connection is still available, which means they don't have to lean in. Distance becomes easy when connection is guaranteed. But the moment you stop chasing, the system loses balance. Suddenly, there's space, real space, not protest silence, not manipulation, not emotional testing, actual withdrawal of pursued energy. And that changes something fundamental. Because in the pursuer-distancer dynamic, pursuit regulates anxiety, not just yours. Theirs too. When you chase, you carry the emotional momentum. You initiate conversations. You repair tension. You ask the deeper questions. You move the relationship forward. And while it may feel exhausting to you, it stabilizes the system. The avoidance stays slightly back. You stay slightly forward. Predictable, familiar. But when you stop, the predictability disappears, and the avoidant nervous system doesn't immediately feel relief. It feels uncertainty, because distance only feels safe when someone is still there on the other end. When that emotional supply disappears, something unexpected happens. Curiosity begins to return, not always consciously, but psychologically. They start noticing the silence, the lack of effort, the absence of reassurance, the space where your energy used to be. And space creates questions. Are they pulling away? Are they done? Did something change? The dynamic has flipped. Now they are the one, without confirmation, without control over the emotional direction. And that is unfamiliar territory, because most avoidance systems are comfortable responding. They are less comfortable initiating. Pursuit requires vulnerability. It requires leaning in, and leaning in activates exposure. So when you stop chasing, you are not playing a game. You are removing a role. And when one role disappears, the system must reorganize. Sometimes that means they step forward. Sometimes that means they stay frozen. But either way, the dynamic is no longer feeding itself. This is why many people notice that the avoidant becomes more attentive after they detach, more curious, more responsive, sometimes even warmer. Not because they suddenly changed personalities, but because the emotional gravity shifted. And humans are wired to move toward uncertainty, especially when something once felt guaranteed. The key difference here is intention. If you stop chasing to force a reaction, the energy still feels like pursuit, just inverted. But when you genuinely release the need to manage the connection, the shift becomes real. Now you're not regulating their comfort anymore. You're regulating your own. And that changes the entire emotional equation. Because the pursuer-distancer dynamic only survives when one person keeps compensating. The moment compensation ends, the system either evolves or collapses. And that's when you truly see what was holding the relationship together. Not chemistry, not fate, energy balance. And when that balance shifts, everything else starts revealing itself. When you stop chasing an avoidant, the first thing that changes is not their behavior. It's the energy field between you. For a long time, that field may have been tilted. You thinking about them more, initiating more, reaching more, repairing more, even if they cared, even if they showed up sometimes. The emotional weight wasn't evenly distributed, and humans adapt quickly to imbalance. If someone else is carrying the momentum, you unconsciously relax into the position behind them, not because you're cruel, because the system allows it. Avoidants often settle into the distancer role without consciously choosing it. They respond, they reciprocate at times, but they rarely drive the emotional direction because driving requires exposure. Exposure means risk. Risk means vulnerability, and vulnerability activates discomfort in avoidance systems. So they stay slightly back. And as long as you stay slightly forward, the relationship keeps moving. But here's what most people don't realize: pursuit doesn't just create connection, it also removes mystery. When you are always the one reaching, they never have to wonder. They never sit in uncertainty. They never experience the absence of you. You are emotionally available on demand. And while that feels loving to you, it can reduce psychological tension for them. Tension isn't always negative. Healthy tension creates attraction. It creates curiosity. It creates investment. When you remove tension completely, you also remove the space where desire grows. This doesn't mean play games. It means recognize dynamics. Because the moment you genuinely stop chasing, a vacuum forms, and humans are highly sensitive to vacuums, especially emotional ones. Now they notice the delay, the silence, the shift in tone. You're not asking where they are. You're not initiating late night conversations. You're not trying to decode their distance. And suddenly, they don't feel managed anymore. They feel unanchored. For the first time, they experience what you used to feel: uncertainty. And uncertainty activates attention. The brain scans for changes in patterns. Why is it different? Did something happen? Are they pulling away? Have I lost control of the pace? That last question is rarely conscious, but it's powerful because in the pursuer-distancer dynamic, the distancer often controls proximity. They decide when to come close, when to pull back, when to re-engage. But when you stop chasing, control becomes less predictable. Now they don't know if closeness will still be available when they want it. And that's where curiosity starts growing. Not dramatic panic, not instant transformation. Curiosity. They may check your social media more, reply faster, initiate lightly, test the emotional temperature. This isn't manipulation, it's regulation. Their system is trying to recalibrate because when emotional supply changes, the nervous system reassesses value. Scarcity creates awareness, and awareness increases perceived importance. But here's the deeper layer. When you stop chasing, you also stop reinforcing their avoidance. Every time you overfunctioned, you allowed them to underfunction. Every time you repaired alone, you allowed them to disengage safely. Every time you carried emotional responsibility, you prevented them from feeling its weight. Removing pursuit returns responsibility to the system. Now, if they want connection, they must create movement. And movement feels different when it's voluntary. That's when you see the truth. If they lean in, it's because they choose to, not because you pulled them forward. If they stay distant, it's because they cannot move. Without external pressure, either outcome gives clarity, and clarity is powerful. But there's something important here. Stopping pursuit is not a tactic. If you withdraw, while still obsessing internally, the energy doesn't fully shift. They may still feel the pull. Real change happens when your focus returns to yourself, when your emotional center is no longer orbiting their availability, when your days feel full without waiting for their message. That internal shift is what changes the dynamic. Because people don't respond only to behavior, they respond to presence, to tone, to emotional posture. When you are no longer leaning forward, they feel it. And that's when the system must decide. Will it rebalance? Or was it only functioning because you were compensating? That decision reveals everything. Here's where most people misunderstand what's happening. When you stop chasing and the avoidance starts leaning in a little, it's tempting to think, it worked, but this isn't about winning. It's about rebalancing. Because what's really shifting is psychological space. In the old dynamic, there wasn't much space. You filled it with reassurance, with effort, with emotional labor, with constant availability. Space was collapsed. And when space collapses, so does polarity, so does curiosity, so does tension. But when you step back, space reappears. And space does something powerful. It forces self reflection. For the first time, they have to sit with their own feelings without you managing them. No one is prompting connection. No one is initiating repair. No one is asking the deeper questions. Silence becomes louder. And silence is uncomfortable for someone used to control. Avoidants are often comfortable with distance when they are the ones creating it. But when distance isn't their decision, it feels different. It feels unstable because now they don't know where they stand. And uncertainty activates attention. Attention increases focus. Focus increases perceived value. This is basic psychology. We assign more importance to what feels less guaranteed. When you were always there, your presence felt stable, reliable, expected. Now it feels conditional, not because you're playing games, but because you stopped overfunctioning. And that's when something subtle begins. They start remembering your consistency, your warmth, your effort, not from a place of pressure, from absence. Absence clarifies value. But here's the deeper layer. When you stop chasing, you also stop absorbing their avoidance. Before, their distance would trigger you. You'd respond, reach out, close the gap, which prevented them from fully experiencing the emotional consequences of pulling away. Now, when they create space, it actually exists, and they have to sit in it. That's new. That's uncomfortable. Because avoidance only feels powerful when someone else is still pursuing. Without pursuit, avoidance becomes isolation, and isolation feels different than controlled distance. This is where curiosity turns into awareness. They start asking themselves questions, not dramatic ones, small ones. Why does it feel quieter? Why do I miss their presence? Why am I thinking about them more now? This isn't manipulation. It's psychological recalibration. The system is trying to find balance again. And here's the truth. Most people aren't ready for. Sometimes the avoidant does step forward. They initiate more. They soften. They reach out because the dynamic force growth. But sometimes they don't. And that silence is just as important because it tells you something critical. The relationship may have been sustained by your pursuit alone, your energy, your effort, your emotional investment. When you remove that and nothing moves toward you, that's clarity. Painful, but clean. And clean clarity is healthier than chaotic hope. The pursuer distancer dynamic survives on imbalance. When imbalance disappears, the relationship either evolves into mutual effort or reveals its limits. And here's what truly changes. When you stop chasing, you stop measuring your worth by their responsiveness. You stop feeling responsible for their emotional availability. You stop trying to earn closeness. And that internal shift is bigger than any reaction they might have. Because now, even if they come back, it's different. You're not leaning forward. You're observing. You're grounded. You're choosing. And that changes the power structure entirely. not power over them, power over yourself, which was the real shift all along. There's one more layer to this, and it's the part most people skip. When you stop chasing, you don't just change the dynamic, you expose the truth of it. Because the pursuer distancer system can feel like chemistry, intensity, complicated love, but often it's just imbalance repeating itself. One nervous system overfunctioning, one nervous system underengaging, held together by motion. The moment motion stops, reality becomes visible. If the avoidant steps forward, consistently, not once, not reactively, but steadily, that means something shifted internally. They're choosing proximity, not reacting to absence. That's growth. But if they only lean in, when they feel you slipping, and retreat again, once they feel secure, that's the old system, trying to restart. That's not evolution. That's regulation. And this is where your awareness matters most. Because once you've stopped chasing, you'll feel the difference immediately. Reactive attention feels urgent. Grounded effort feels calm. Reactive contact feels anxious. Grounded contact feels intentional. Your body will know. The deeper truth is this. When you stop chasing, you stop proving, you stop auditioning, you stop trying to earn closeness through emotional labor. And that changes how you experience love. You're no longer asking, how do I get them to step up? You're asking, are they capable of meeting me here? That question flips everything. Because now the relationship isn't about activating their curiosity. It's about observing their capacity. Some avoidants rise to the space. They feel the absence. They reflect. They lean in with more maturity. Others stay comfortable in distance. And when they don't feel pursuit, they simply drift. Neither response is personal. It's structural. The system either rebalances or dissolves. And here's the part that truly sets you free. When you stop chasing, you realize something powerful. You were never powerless. You were overinvested. You were carrying more than your share. And once you put that weight down, you can finally see the relationship clearly. Not through longing, not through anxiety, but through equilibrium. If someone only moves toward you when they feel you walking away, that tells you how they relate to connection. If someone moves toward you because they value closeness, even when you're steady, that tells you something else entirely. Removing pursuit doesn't guarantee they'll change. It guarantees you'll see. And seeing clearly is more valuable than chasing blindly. Because the real shift was never about making the avoidant come back. It was about restoring your balance. And from balance, you choose differently. You respond differently. You attract differently. That's what truly happens. When you stop chasing the avoidant, the system reveals itself. And so do you. Before you leave, I want you to be honest with yourself. When you stopped chasing, did they step forward? Or did the silence get louder? Comment one word. Stepped. Or silence. No long explanation. Just the word. I read every comment. And you'll start noticing something powerful in the replies. Patterns. Because once you see the pattern, you stop personalizing it. And when you stop personalizing it, you stop repeating it. If this gave you clarity, subscribe. Not for tactics, for understanding. Because the moment you understand the dynamic, you stop being controlled by it.